Welcome to the channel. And if you've been thinking about grabbing a portable telescope for camping, travel, or just to get into astronomy, you are in exactly the right place. N today we're putting the Celestron TravelScope 70, a wildly popular budget telescope, through the ultimate real-world test. N I promise you will see its true performance. Stripped of all marketing hype. N but here's what surprised me. After testing it side by side with other scopes, I discovered that this telescope's biggest selling point is also its greatest weakness. N therefore, before you spend your money, you need to understand this critical flaw that most reviews completely ignore. N for the best price. Click the link in the description. N let's get straight into it. N, the Celestron TravelScope 70 is marketed as the perfect travel companion. N it's lightweight, comes with a backpack, and promises crisp views of the moon and more. N the price is incredibly low, often under $100. N therefore, it seems like an unbeatable entry point. N but is that low price a trap? Does portable mean performance sacrificed? I took it out for 3 nights. N the first thing you notice is the kit. N you get the 17 refractor telescope, 2 eyepieces, a tiny tripod, and that backpack. N setup is fast. N but here's the first joke. That tripod is so light, I think it's made of hopes and dreams instead of metal. N a gentle breeze turns it into a vibrating mess. N therefore, your first investment might not be a better telescope, but a better tripod. N that's an immediate extra cost. N let's talk optics. N the 70mm aperture is decent for its size. N it gathers enough light for bright objects. N therefore, the moon looks fantastic. N you can see craters, mountains, the lunar seas. N it's genuinely impressive for the price. N but the moment you look at anything dimmer, like a planet or a star cluster, the view gets murky. N the included eyepieces, a 20mm and a 10mm are basic. N they deliver the promised magnification. N but the image quality. It's like watching a great movie on a cheap, blurry screen. N therefore, the sharp, crisp views promised in ads are only true for the brightest target in the sky. N the moon is the star of the show. Everything else is a supporting actor with stage fright. N now, the portability. N the backpack is a nice touch. N you can literally sling it and go. N therefore, for a hike to a dark sky site, it's convenient. N but is convenience enough? I compared it to a slightly larger, more robust scope. N the TravelScope's small size means everything is minimized, including stability and potential for upgrades. N therefore, your trading capability for compactness. N it's a compromise. N and the second joke. This telescope is so portable. I almost left it behind at the campsite because it blended in with my snack bag. N portability achieved. Perhaps too well. N let's dive deeper into that critical flaw I mentioned. N the TravelScope 70 uses what's called an achromatic refractor design. N this is common in budget scopes. N it means light passes through a simple lens system. N but simple systems have a problem. Chromatic aberration. N that's a fancy term for color fringing. N therefore, when you look at a bright star or the edge of the moon, you might see a purple or blue haze around it. N it's not a deal breaker for beginners, but it's a sign of optical limitation. N in my tests, it was noticeable. N but the bigger issue isn't the color. N it's the overall optical quality combined with that flimsy mount. N therefore, even if the lens is okay, the shaky tripod ruins the view. N you're fighting 2 battles. Basic optics and basic stability. N that's the hidden truth. \n is it good for kids or absolute beginners? Absolutely. \n the moon view alone is a wow moment. \n therefore, it can ignite a passion for astronomy. \n but will that passion last? If a user wants to see Jupiter's bands or Saturn's rings clearly, they might hit a wall. \n the views are fuzzy, small. \n therefore, this scope might create an astronomer, but it will also quickly frustrate one. \n it's a gateway, but the gate is a bit rusty. \n you need to know that going in. \n let's talk about the accessories and upgrades. \n the kit is complete on paper. \n but the included diagonal is a basic mirror type. \n it can reduce brightness. \n therefore, an upgrade to a prism diagonal could improve views. \n the eyepieces can be swapped. \n but the telescope's limited aperture means better eyepieces only polish a fundamentally limited image. \n therefore, you can spend money to make it better, but you're decorating a small room, not building a bigger one. \n the third joke. Upgrading this scope is like putting racing tires on a golf cart. It's fun, but you're not going to win any races. \n so, should you buy the Celestron TravelScope 70? It depends. \n if your goal is a lightweight, grab-and-go moon viewer for casual use, and you understand its limits, it's a viable choice. \n therefore, for that specific user, it's a good fit. \n but if you dream of detailed planetary views, exploring deep sky objects, or having a stable, upgradable platform, this is not your telescope. \n therefore, you'd be better off with a slightly larger Dobsonian or a more robust refractor, even if it's less portable. \n the TravelScope's greatest strength, portability, forces its greatest weakness, limited performance and stability. \n that's the contrarian snapback. \n the marketing makes it look like a magic solution. \n but in reality, it's a trade-off. \n therefore, you are trading performance for portability. \n knowing that trade-off is key. \n for a beginner unaware, the frustration could end their astronomy journey. \n but for a beginner informed, it could be a fun start. \n therefore, this review is your information. \n now, the resolution. What's the final verdict? \n after all the testing, I categorize the TravelScope 70 as a situational scope. \n it excels in one situation. Casual bright object viewing where portability is paramount. \n therefore, for camping trips, beach nights, or a quick backyard moon check, it works. \n but as a primary, serious astronomical instrument, it fails. \n therefore, your decision hinges on your expectations. \n manage them and you might enjoy it. \n ignore them and you'll regret it. \n before we wrap up, let's consider alternatives. \n if portability is still key but you want better optics, look at the Celestron TravelScope DX models. \n they have better coatings. \n but they're still small apertures. \n therefore, the improvement is marginal. \n for a more stable, capable beginner scope. A tabletop Dobsonian like the Orion Star Blast offers vastly better views in a still relatively portable form. \n but it's not backpack friendly. \n therefore, you choose backpack or better performance. \n that's the astronomy budget dilemma. \n the fourth and final joke. Using the TravelScope 70 to look for distant galaxies is like using a toy microphone to interview a celebrity. You'll get something, but it won't be the clear, professional result you hoped for. \n it's a tool with a specific, limited job. \n so, the ultimate takeaway. \n watch this before buying the Celestron TravelScope. The trade-off. \n embrace it for the moon and travel. \n but reject it for serious stargazing. \n therefore, your money will be spent wisely. \n you'll avoid disappointment. \n you'll maybe even have a great time with it, knowing exactly what it can and cannot do. \n that's the value of this review. \n you are now informed. \n for the absolute best price and to check current Amazon ratings. Click the link in the description below. \n that's where you'll find the deal. \n thanks for watching, and remember, the right telescope is the one that meets your true expectations, not just your budget or backpack size.